State standards aren't the enemy of homeschool. Misunderstanding is. So today, let's dig into how we can make your homeschool lesson planning and functioning simpler by using standards and not stricter. Welcome to Miss Aja Educates. All right, so before we talk about why standard or how standards can help your homeschool, let's go ahead and dig into what exactly standards are. All right, so just in a nutshell, standards are simply a list of skills students are expected to develop by the end of the grade level. I'm going to say that again. Standards are a simple list of skills students are expected to develop by the end of a grade level. So when you are looking for your state standards, when you're going through Google, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, browser, etc., whatever you use, you are going to be taking the time out to find your state standards. And these are going to tell you exactly what the average student needs to know in your state. Okay? Second grade, fifth grade, 10th grade, there's standards for it. All right? No more looking and fonding into the dark to figure out what your child needs to learn at whatever grade level. Reading over the standards is going to set you up for success. It's going to bring clarity. And it's simply just going to guide you into a successful school year. So one thing about standards, they're not going to give you a curriculum. It's not a curriculum. It's not going to tell you what to teach or how to teach. It's not going to be a rigid way on how to homeschool your child. It's none of that. It's simply guidelines on what is expected of your child to learn by the end of a grade level. That's it, which is a great thing because guess what? If your child is ahead, they can move on. If your child is behind, they can move down. So it's a great way to set the stage on your child's learning by understanding those standards and those guidelines. So think of standards as a destination, not a vehicle, a framework, not a rule book, a skill checklist, not daily lessons. All right. So now that we know what standards are, let's talk about why they can actually be a gift to the average homeschool parent. So as I said before, with these standards, you are setting your child up for success. You know the end goal already. So by the end of the school year, you already know, okay, little Johnny needs to know all of his multiplication facts from 1 to 12 by the end of the third grade year. That's a standard, right? And it just helps you to know where your path is and figure out, okay, if there's and it layers your child's learning. It also layers your child's learning so the standards basically also do a great job of step-by-step laying out from simplicity in simplest forms on how to teach your child. Okay, so with standards, you're going to stay focused and intentional. You're going to track real progress. You're going to know what to supplement and when. And you're also going to plan lessons with confidence. All right, so these standards are just going to set you up for success because you know where you're going. One thing about homeschooling, a lot of times, a lot of parents, we decide to kind of rely so much on the curriculum. And before we know it, gaps happen. All right, even with the best teaching, with the best curriculum, you're going to have gaps. You're going to have some shortcomings in your instruction, in your learning, etc. And those standards are going to help smooth out that road so that it's easier to see the gaps, to see what other things maybe you need to really focus and hone in on. And it's going to give you a lot of clarity on where your child is and how they're progressing and if they're progressing at all with a certain concept. So standards are not to harm you. They don't bite. All right. Standards are to help you and to guide you, to give you that peace. So you're like, I know where I'm going. I'm confident. Let's get there. All right. So this next point, this is where a lot of parents get stuck. So I want to break down an important distinction that changes everything. Okay. So like I said before, think of standards as a roadmap. Okay. You are going to New York City. Let's just say we're looking at a map, we're trying to go to New York City. Okay? That's the standard. Or let's just put in education terms. We are going to read, we're going to be reading to understand the main idea of a text. That's the standard. That's the goal. That's the map. We're creating a map for understanding standards, understanding reading standards for main idea, right? So that's the end goal. Learning targets are the roads to get to that goal. Okay? So a learning target could be using the chunking strategy, right? To understand parts of a text in order to find the main idea. Understanding what a main topic is, what the whole idea of a story is, being able to ask and answer questions when reading a full text. All of those things need to be completed goal by goal by goal before a child can really derive a main idea from a text. Let's go ahead and turn it into a math example. Pretty simple. Your child needs to learn how to add and subtract one-digit numbers, 1 to 2-digit numbers between the numbers 1 through 20. How can they get there? That's what question you're getting. That's the standard. Adding and subtracting using numbers 1 through 20. That's the standard for first or second grade. You can choose your pick. So then from there, you're just mapping out your learning goals. What are the roads I need to follow in order for my child to learn how to add and subtract between 1 and 20? Simple. Number one, they need to understand place value, right? That's really important when it comes to adding and subtracting. They need to know different strategies, using manipulatives in order to add groups of numbers, using number bonds, right? Knowing how to count from 1 to 20, right? Or knowing how to count from 1 to 40 if you're adding certain numbers, or 1 to 50, right? All of those are building blocks in order for your child to eventually know how to add and subtract numbers 1 through 20. That's it. Notice how we started off with our standard. Then we build steps up to that standard. And that's what standards do. They help you guide your learning targets, your goals, and it helps you figure out, okay, this is the end goal. These are the things I need to teach my child in order to get there. That's it in simplicity. All right. So let's go ahead and continue with that. All right. So let's go ahead and get into this next point. Okay. So let me make, so I've already made some concrete examples. So let's go ahead and talk about the simplicity of everything. Okay. So when you look at those, so when you kind of look over those examples that I just brought up, you don't have to complicate it. You can make it as simple as you want. And actually in the next video, I will actually be breaking down and showing you guys a few standards from elementary school, one standard from middle, and one standard from high school, and just showing you simple learning targets that you can derive in real time from those standards. Okay. So if you really like content like this and you want to be a better educator in excellence, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. That's what we do. All we're doing is we're trying to be better home educators. We're trying to operate in excellence, and we're trying to up the bar when it comes to education. So if you like content like this, like I said, like, comment, and subscribe. So let's go ahead and continue. So this is what happens. So there comes a crossword road. All right. You probably already feel it. So if you're not using standards, or this is what happens when parents either are not using standards at all, or you start using standards and then you just decide, hey, I'm not going to use standards anymore. Okay. So number one, lessons feel very scattered. All right. You're all over the place. Okay. You're just pulling lessons from out of the air. All right. Progress feels unclear. So even though little Johnny, and I always use the synonym little Johnny, but little Johnny is over here filling out so many papers, doing so many activities, but you don't know where he's going. All right. He took the state test that you're required to take, and he's all over the place. It seems like he's going backward, right? Or he's not making much of any progress at all, or you don't even know where you're going. That's what happens. So you feel scattered. Your lessons feel scattered. Progress feels unclear. Some skills get repeated and others skip. This happens a lot. So especially if you are going through a curriculum, sometimes you'll be doing the same thing over and over. And you're like, hey, my child already has done this, which in math, that's kind of a given. You're going to do the same skills, but it shouldn't be you're literally going over the same concepts over and over and over, and your child has mastered them, but yet you're still finding time to continue to go over them. Now, I understand a spiral review. Spiral review is simply, okay, you're reviewing over things that you did in the past in order so that you understand it because it's foundational to future concepts. But sometimes you're literally going over the same skill, the same target, the same concept, and it's a waste of time and you're not progressing. All right. So, and then again, you just don't have that clear path. However, when you use standards and you decide to just take the time out, understand the standards, and go ahead and map out those learning targets so that you can create great, functional, excellent lesson plans, which is the ultimate goal, making a lesson plan and then eventually teaching that lesson plan and implement and reflect. Some skills, what happens is every lesson has purpose. You know when to slow down and when to move forward. So you have a beginning and an end. Oftentimes, if you don't have standards, you're going in a circle. No, but when you have standards, you have a beginning point and an end point, and you can figure out from that end point what to do next, right? Isn't that amazing? So yes, you know when to slow down or move forward, and then you stay in control, even if the curriculum isn't perfect. If you have standards, you are mapping out those learning goals / learning targets. You are creating lesson plans that are impactful and engaging, reflecting on your instruction, doing your instruction, bringing that learning to life. It doesn't matter if your curriculum is trash. Trust me, I know. Okay, I work for the school system. I've had a lot of trash curriculums actually working for the state. But anyway, and then some curriculums I have right now, they're not the best. But guess what? Because I took the time out to understand the standards, it's okay. I can supplement. I can find other resources from somewhere else to bring out what I need to bring out. I can jump around my curriculum a little bit because I know exactly what the goal is. And I like to teach to mastery, right? Everybody has their own way of teaching. I teach to mastery. So that means, yes, we're talking about in preschool, we're talking about sorting and classifying shapes, colors, describing objects, and putting them into groups, right? And then we're building off the skill of, knowing our shapes, knowing our colors, etc. So yes, I went over the standards and we're going to keep doing that until mastery, right? But at the end of the day, I know where we had to start and I know where I had to end. And that's it. So I'll know where the end is when they understand the whole concept of classifying and sorting. You can do the same thing. And it feels so, you regulate your homeschool in such peace. And it is just such a calming breeze to your homeschool circumstance. So do that, guys. Please, please, please do that. Again, when you use standards, lessons don't feel scattered. Your lessons don't feel scattered. Progress feels clear. You know when to slow down or move forward. And then you stay in control, even if the curriculum isn't perfect. Okay, I know I had to re-say that again. And also, going back to what I said earlier, if your child, say for example, is at first grade, but they missed a skill that should have been taught in kindergarten, you can always go down and figure out, okay, what's that prerequisite skill? Build that skill for your child and then bring them right back up to where they need to be. Or if your child's advanced, say for example, your child's in 7th grade, they are, everything you give them for 7th grade, all the concepts and stuff, they are just like A. They're just doing amazing, superb. Challenge them. Go up to 8th grade. All right. Challenge them. Go up to 8th grade. All right. And build from there. Challenge. Your child should not just be in the same, things should not be too easy for them. Things should not be too hard for them. It should be a nice middle where they're being challenged, but they're able to do the work. All right. So it's a pull and tug when it comes to that. All right. I know that was a long-winded one, but yes, there we go. That's the difference between parents who stick to the standards and those that don't. And those that don't, I'm telling you, you're gonna be all over the place. I'm telling you. I warned you. I mean, there's no other way to go about it. All right. Now, standards help you teach with intention and not guesswork. So, and last but not least, here's another point. Because when standards aren't used, and this matters because here's some common weak points. So And this matters because when standards aren't used regularly, certain patterns tend to show up over time. And I've already specified that earlier, that you can see a lot of gaps within your child's education. It's all over the place. You're like, where did this come from? Why don't you know this? Because you're not stepping stone using those learning goals to get to the full main idea. You don't understand where you're going. So it looks scattered. All right. So here are some things that can also show up if you are scattered and you're not using standards as well. So, and these become very common weak points. So repeating the same level year after year, I've mentioned that. Missing foundational skills, I've mentioned that as well. Feeling unsure if your child is on track. So you're always guessing, I don't know if this is okay. I don't know if they're getting there. Overworking kids without seeing real growth. So this is another one, just giving them stuff over and over and over. And then there's nothing coming out of it. You don't know if they're growing. You don't know what's going on. You're just confused about the whole process. Okay, so standards help catch gaps early before frustration sets into your child. So this is not even just for you, but this is for your child. This is so your child also feels confident about what they're doing. Your child feels confident about where they're going. All right, those learning goals that I'm going to be talking about in the next video, your child should be able to actually say and understand what the point of the lesson is when you're lesson planning. If they don't know what you're doing or what the end goal is, there's really no reason for you to be doing it, right? And your child needs to know where you're going so they understand how to learn, how to grow, and you know what they're learning for the day, right? And then, of course, you know, if you want to, if your child is old enough, you can say, hey, here's a couple of standards that I'm using, or whatever the case may be. And you can also even show them the standards so that they know, oh, that's the ultimate goal. Oh, I'm supposed to know how to multiply and divide 3-digit numbers by the end of the school year. I can do that, right? It's just a whole partner. It's a partner thing between you and your child. Of course, you are leading, but if you kind of allow your child to be a part of the process, especially if they're old enough and they can comprehend what's going on, sure, you can share those learning goals with your child. You should, and you can even share the standards with older children. Like I'm talking like 5th, 6th graders, whatever it is, because they'll be able to understand it a lot better. All right, so here are just a few reminders to wrap it up. I hope I was clear. If I wasn't, please put it in the comments. If you are liking this video so far and you think another homeschool parent would really benefit from this video, please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe and share so that you can get more content and that we can learn and grow together. All right, so here we are in the last stretch here. Here, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So before we bring this all to an end, I want to make this one thing clear. Standards are not the law. They are simply a guide. They help ensure your child is growing academically, performing at or above national average, and prepared for whatever comes next. That is it. Okay? So you are still in control. You still choose the curriculum. You still choose the pace. You still choose the teaching style. You still choose the learning environment. You still choose the teaching method, the assessment. All of that power is still in your hands. All you're doing is following something that's already been created for you by the state. Thousands upon millions of teachers use it every single day, and homeschool parents, those that, you know, take heed to these type of things, or whatever the case may be. And it's not going to be a surprise. A lot of states require testing. It's not about passing a test. It's not about any of that stuff. But if you want your child to be prepared, if you are wanting your child to go to college, because guess what? That's a public institution or private institution, but they still follow some type of standards to get into that, right? You are setting them up for success with no gaps. Unfortunately, a lot of us do have to, like with me, I'm in North Carolina, I have to test every year, basically, starting from, I believe, first and up. So first grade and up, I have to actually test. Some of you guys, y'all have to test earlier than that or later than that. But this is going to set you up. Understanding the standards is going to make sure, hey, we don't have any gaps. My child knows what the average, my child's lab knows just as much or more than the average student who abides by the standards in so-and-so state. And you can just blank state, right? It's in Mississippi or North Carolina or California or whatever. So yes, it is not the law. It is simply a guide. All right? So let it guide you to success. So let's go ahead and go to our biblical encouragement for the day, for the video. All right, here's a little bit of biblical encouragement. Okay, and of course, we all know that this is ultimately more than academic. It's about stewardship. It's about how we steward what God has entrusted to us. Homeschooling isn't about perfection. It's about wisdom, intention, and excellence. So the Bible reminds in Colossians 3:23 through 24, and whatever you do, do it wholeheartedly as to the Lord, not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of inheritance. For you serve the Lord Christ. All right. So at the end of the day, as you're going through your homeschool, do everything unto Christ. Doing your state standards, taking the time out, yes, it's another thing on your list, but it's another thing that's going to help your child go to excellence, right? Even Christ tells us what to do in his word, right? And imagine if that wasn't there, right? Standards are kind of similar to that, right? And at the end of the day, no matter how this is, I don't know if this is daunting, I don't know if it's confusing, but at the end of the day, put it in God's hands. He has your back at the end of the day. He wants you to operate in excellence, and you want to do everything unto him, not because of your own pride or ego, not because of what others may think, not because of your own children, right? We're doing this because we love God and we want to steward our children, their education in the best way possible with him in mind. All right. So I'm doing this for God. I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this. End of the day, because we're doing it as unto God, he's going to definitely oversee it and he's going to tell us which way to go. All right. So remember, if this is all sounding really daunting to you, go ahead and pray about it, right? And say, hey, God, what do you think about what I just listened to? And from there, he will guide you to the best options for your family. All right. And that's the great thing about being a biblically founded organization. And also just trusting in biblical principles in order to guide this whole process. All right. So I hope this video resonated with many of you. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.